Shellfish is the protein of the future because you don't need to use fresh water. So I think everyone should start eating clams, oysters, and mussels to save the planet.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast.
Do you have any idea how oysters are grown? I didn't, so I wanted to go and talk with an oyster farmer. Fransico Santelices sat down with us and had a conversation about what they do at Skagit Shellfish. It's really cool, and his story is awesome too. How he got started in this, how his family got involved in raising shellfish that he says are the future of protein, and he'll explain why. I'm Dylan Honcoop. This is the Real Food, Real People podcast, documenting my journeys all over Washington State to get to know the real people behind our food, sponsored by the Dairy Farmers of Washington and Mana Insurance Group. So how do you grow shellfish, clams, and oysters? I mean, normally I think people think of it just, food from the sea.
Yeah.
But you are a farmer.
Yes.
How does it work?
So the process is pretty similar to farming in the ground. We start with a seed. Actually, it's a very, very tiny seed. That is, we receive it from the hatcheries approximately in 2 millimeter size. Then we put it in our flopsy. That is kind of a nursery. And, we take care of the seed like a mother who takes care of the baby. We watch them grow. We clean them pretty much every day or every other day. And then the good thing is that we don't need to feed them. The ocean help us feeding the baby.
Right.
And then when this...
so that's called a flopsy?
The flopsy is a barge.
Okay,
It's a barge in which we put the seed. And the seed is sleeping in these silos that are kind of beams.
Yeah.
And the water go through those silos, providing all the nutrients to the seed. And then the seed just grow and grow until they get to 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch. And then these babies are ready to go to the ocean to finish the process.
So how do you do that then? You have to take them out of the nursery, the flopsy, and go plant them?
Pretty much that's what we do. Here we're dealing with animals. We call them the animals. So oysters, need to be sorted and graded like every once a week in the flopsy until we, divided the big ones, the small ones, or the medium ones. And then the ones that are ready in the size, we put them in bags in mesh. And then we transport them to the bay. And then in the bay, we have these lines. And then in these lines, we hang the growing bags and we put the seed in a density that is approximately 200 to 250 oysters per bag.
And how big are the bags?
The bags are like 40 inch wide by 20 inch. So
so that's a lot of oysters for not that large of an area.
Oh yeah, it's 200 animals that are 1/2 inch, so the volume is not too much. It's like a liter, approximately.
Yeah.
But the oysters are going to start growing in the bay. All of this process happened pretty much in the spring because oysters have more nutrients during the spring and during the summer when the temperature is high and there is more microalgae in the water. So the oysters are going to be eating more and growing faster. So we plant the seed in the spring, and then the oysters grow pretty fast during the spring, summer, and at the beginning of the autumn. And then the oysters kind of get sleepy during the second part of the autumn and the winter. And they start growing again the following year. So the whole process from seed of 2 millimeters to commercial size oysters that could be from 2 3/4 to 3+ inches. It depends on the variety of the oysters, but can take like 1 year or 2 years.
So 1 to 2 years that it goes into growing it before it's ready to send to people's plates.
Yeah.
Talk about what your oysters are like too, finished. I've read some reviews online. I understand they're unique in their flavor.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting about oysters because the flavor of an oyster is pretty related to the bay. The condition of the bay, of the condition of the waters, are the ones that define the flavor of the oysters. So in our case, our bay is pretty unique is a bay that have a very low salinity because we have a lot of influence of fresh water that is coming from the Cascade Mountains. So that have a very positive impact because the temperature of our water is, I will say, a little bit lower than most of the temperatures in the Puget Sounds.
Yeah.
So that allowed us to have a pretty healthy oysters, pretty much in the summer when the temperatures are high and oysters are kind of suffocating when they are out of tide. The fresh water helps to keep the temperature under control a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I will say that our oysters is oysters that have a medium to low salinity, and the flavor is pretty fresh, I will say. Have a very strong cucumber ending, and I like them a lot. I love them pretty much.
That makes sense that they want cool water. Just like salmon need cool water too. And that's hard as the climate changes. It's more and more challenging.
Yeah, it's been pretty challenging. I remember when we started the oyster farming approximately 6 years ago, the water has been changing dramatically. I mean, at the beginning, we pretty much didn't have any mortality. The oysters were growing pretty healthy and nice during the summer. And in the last year, I will say in the last 2 years, but the worst part was the last year, we experienced tremendous mortalities and pretty much related with the heat waves that we have at the end of June and in July.
Yeah.
And that is generating a lot of problems. But it's not only the high temperatures, also is there is a lot of concern in the industry related with the acidification of the ocean and the levels of oxygen. So as you understand that the oyster, important part of the oysters is the shell. And the shell is a combination of different minerals, but the most important mineral is calcium. And when the oyster is underwater and the pH of the water starts decreasing, the calcium start losing minerals and get softer. And when the shell gets softer, it gets more fragile, and that can finish producing problems, health problem for the oysters and results of mortality.
That makes sense. Yeah, I was wondering, okay, I know that ocean acidification isn't good for a lot of different life in the ocean, but specifically for shellfish, it's like, how does that actually affect them? And that makes sense. It causes the shells to get too soft.
Yeah, and affects in all the stages, affects when the early stages, I think, is more complicated, but also when the oysters are in the adult stages also is complicated. So now we're trying to deal with different ways to see how can we change a little bit our farming practices to reduce that, trying to reduce the densities, trying to change our operations to be more gentle with the oysters. But I think this problem of high temperatures and then lower pH levels that related to acidification and is going to be with us for a while. So we need to try to find different farming techniques to keep our oyster healthy and to deal with the mortality that we are suffering in the last few years.
How bad has it been? How much of the oysters has it taken out?
It's a big percentage. I know some friends that have lost many, important percentage, like 60 to 70% of their crop. Last year, we suffered a big percentage too, around 70 to 80% in some areas. That was very, very dramatically because you plant, 1 million seeds and then you finish with this 30 or 20%. That can be devastating. So, so it's a problem. It's a big problem. I know a lot of farmers that are looking different alternatives. We have a friend that is located here in the Puget Sound that they are experimenting with this kelp farm that helps to reduce the acidification of the ocean and also, increase the level of oxygen. So this is a pretty interesting program that they are working with the University of Washington, and we are trying to see and explore if that can help us in our bay.
Yeah, more kelp.
Yeah,
Is there much kelp out there at all right now? Or would it be hard to grow more?
Not that I know. I think kelp is not difficult to grow. The kelp grow a lot during the summer. When you hit spring or summer with the temperature of the water, kelp start growing amazingly good and have very good properties. But it's difficult to get all the permitting to grow kelp. I know a lot of friends that are willing to start their farms of kelp, but it's difficult to get access to deeper waters. For growing your kelp, you need to have subtidal leases, and that's very difficult to get.
So what does the future hold then? I mean, in the next few years, are you going to have the same problem? Or, like last year, was it so bad just because of that heat wave, which was, hopefully we don't have that again, at least not for a while. I guess there's no way to know, but you've got to be thinking of what could happen, right?
Yeah, we kind of, the philosophy of our company is to, plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah.
So we are doing different experiments because, no one knows the secret, recipe for reducing the mortalities and, face these new issues that are coming with the extreme weather. So what we are doing is playing with the densities pretty much.
Yeah.
And, we have mortalities in one sector, so we're moving to a different sector. We're trying to looking for deeper water, and also we will see this year. Unfortunately, this is like try and error. So we did a lot of changes, and we will see this year if those changes are going to work or not. If not, we're going to need to try different changes. But the first measure is to increase the volume of seed. So if we are expecting like 50 or 60% of mortality, what we are doing is putting double of the seed.
Yeah, it's crazy. But that's how else can you stay ahead of it, right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the way to do it. But the good thing is that our company is a small family-owned farm, and so our volumes are not huge. Like we're not a huge farm. Right now we have 500 lines in South Skagit Bay in 3 different areas, and we are dealing with a volume that is comfortable for us. So we have plans to continue growing, but little by little we're going to be trying.
So all of your oysters and clams are grown in Skagit Bay?
All of them, yes.
And you said there's like different varieties of oysters?
Yes.
Like how many different kinds? What are the options?
Oh, there is many, but what we have in our farm right now is Pacific oysters. Also, we have some Kumamoto oysters that are pretty nice. I love them, and the market is willing to get more and more of those ones.
Yeah.
And also we have a little bit of Virginicas. We have an experiment with Virginicas. And also we are having some experiment with Olympic oysters that are native from here, from Puget Sound. So we're pretty excited about that. And all of those oysters also require different farming techniques. So it's difficult because you need to adjust the conditions of those new varieties to the conditions that you have in your bay. Sometimes some oysters are not able to grow in all the bays.
What about clams? Those are the 2 things. You do clams too?
Yeah, we do clams too. So in the clams operation, we are farming clams from a while. Our dad started the operation approximately at middle 80s. We're doing soft shell clams for many years. But with clams, we also have some great challenges. There is very difficult to get seed. We in our farm operation, we need to reseed every 6 years approximately. That is a cycle of life that we have with our clams. And at the beginning, we were buying the seed here from a local hatchery, from the Lumi tribe. But then it's been a while that it's been able to get that seed. And also we have having some issues with predators. We heard that there is a lot of problems in the Lumi Pound with the green crab, and we haven't seen that yet. But I think we also are gonna have that issue pretty fast because those predators move quickly, and they are pretty bad for the clams.
So green crab, and I've been hearing about this being an invasive species, and it actually goes after the clams and eats them, or what?
Yeah, pretty much what they do is they cut and eat the neck, but in that process they kill the clam completely, and they are invasive, and they are fast eaters, so they can destroy a full bay in pretty little amount of time. So it's very challenging, and so we're playing with nets to see if that's going to help. But also we need to make some research to make sure that to understand if we have them or not, and how we can deal with that problem if we have. I think we have it, because we are seeing a decrease in our densities, but dramatically in the last 3 years. But we're still not totally sure, because we are not crab experts. We never fish for crab. We don't have license to do it. So we need to understand and learn how to do that part of the process.
Reminds me of my dad and his raspberry farm. Why are these plants producing less? Well, it could be this, but maybe it's that. And you think but you don't know for sure until you do a lot of research.
Yeah. We also have been doing some experiments with manila.
Manila clams.
Manila clams. Yeah, we planted some manillas a couple of years ago. We have some succeed in some areas, but in other areas the results were pretty bad. And I think the issue of the salinity of our bay may be one of the factors why the manillas are not growing that well.
They want a saltier bay.
I understand they need saltier bays. And during spring and summer, the salinity of our bay increased a lot. Can get to 27, 28 parts per million. But when you face winter and in low tides, the salinity drops pretty much to zero. And that's when the manillas start having some issues, I think.
A lot of that fresh water then coming in from the Skagit River.
Yes, that's right. But also now, in a couple of years ago, last year, we opened the north part of the bay, and we plant some manila clams there, and we are waiting to see the results this year in spring. Hopefully, they will grow, and we can, diversify our clams operation.
We'll get back to the conversation with Fransico Santelices in just a moment. But first, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors that make the Real Food, Real People podcast a reality. We wouldn't be here having these conversations without their support. Dairy Farmers of Washington has been a supporter from the beginning. We appreciate what they do so much, and we really do something very similar to what they're all about at Dairy Farmers of Washington, which is sharing the real stories of the people who produce the dairy products, the milk, but not just milk, cheese, ice cream, yogurt. The list could go on and on. All these wonderful dairy products produced sustainably and in a healthy, safe way that stewards the land around them here in Washington State. wadairy.org is their website. Go check it out and find out so much more about Dairy Farmers of Washington. Also, Mana Insurance Group, supporter now for 2 seasons of the podcast. We really appreciate it. They're all about protecting your family's financial future. That's what insurance is really all about. It's not just, do I get this or that covered? It's what is your financial situation into the future should anything happen? Plan ahead rather than react when things happen. And that's their focus at Mana Insurance Group. You can check them out online, manainsurancegroup.com. Thanks to both of them for supporting the podcast. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, or you know a group that is, certainly shoot me an email, Dylan@realfoodrealpeople.org. That's Dylan, Dillon, at realfoodrealpeople.org. Now we go back to the conversation with Fransico Santelices at Skagit Shellfish. So back to the process. You get the seed, you incubate and grow the seed until it's big enough to go out into the bay in bags. And then they're out there for a year
Yeah, or 2 or 3, depends on the variety of the oyster.
Then how do you harvest them? You just go get those bags and take the clams out of the bags?
Well, in the
Or,
middle,
and I guess oysters too. I'm saying clams, but it's both.
yes. Well, in the middle of, it's not like we just put the seed and then we forget about the oysters. There is a lot of maintenance, because we have these bags with a float, and the technique is called the flip bags. Pretty much when the tide comes, the float puts the bag up, and then when the tide retrieves, the water go down and the bags go below. So what happens is all of that movement is the ones that generate tumbling oysters. That is a round oyster with a deep cap full of meat. So it's a oyster that is appreciated for the market. But our bay also have a lot of current. So that means that we need to maintain a lot and invest a lot of time and effort to keep those lines in place and to clean the bags, because there is a lot of barnacles and mussels that are looking for something to attach, and they start growing in everywhere. So we need to once or twice per year we replace all the bags, bring in here to the processing plant, clean them, let them dry. And so there is a lot of movement, and there is a lot of sorting too. We put the seed in the bay, approximately in densities like 250 oysters or 200 of oysters per bag, and then when we start changing these bags, we split the seed.
Spread them out a little bit.
And we change it, so we go from 250 to 125, and then we separate them in sizes. So ideally you want the big oysters to stay with the big oysters, and the medium with the medium, small with the small. So there's no unfair competition, between the big one and the small. Because pretty much the oysters feeds from microalgae that is, swimming in the water. So a big oysters can filtrate a lot of water. The little oysters are not going to be able to filtrate the same amount of water, and they are sharing this common space in the bag. So what happens is the big ones are going to be able to eat more, and the small ones, are going to be kind of attaching in between them, don't getting the same access of food. So there is a lot of labor related with that.
So you have to go out when the tide is out to do that, or do you go out in boats to check those, or how does that work as you're maintaining it throughout the year? Yeah,
that's right. Every day our crew go to our landing. They load all the materials into our boats, and then they ride approximately 45 minutes to 1 hour, depending on what sector are we working in. And then they just wait like 45 minutes or an hour until the water retrieves completely, and then they can work in the maintenance. So like in a regular day that is like 9 or 10 hour shift, they work without water approximately 3 to 4 hours. So the labor needs to be pretty coordinated to make sure that we are going to have enough time to take care of all the work that needs to be done, because oyster requires a lot of attention.
Well, and sometimes it's in the night too then, right?
Yeah, of course. The tide change every day.
Right.
So during spring and summer, you enjoy working under the sun, very nice weather and good condition. But then in autumn and winter, the low tides are during the night. So you're exposed to the rain, to the wind, to the snow, all the hard conditions, and the crew needs to be working under that condition. So it's pretty hard.
How big is the crew?
Our crew right now is 6 workers, and they are amazing guys. They are pretty hard workers, and they have been working with us from a while, but it's pretty hard. So we appreciate them very much.
Yeah. And then you probably have more employees than that. That's the crew that goes out, and then you have others that do the processing, or does the work get shared between?
No, then we have another crew here in our processing plant, but that crew is not very big. Most of the labor is done in the bay,
Yeah.
Here in the processing plant, what we do pretty much is cleaning oysters because oysters arrive with barnacles and mussels, so we need to clean them. So we have a very good product that is able to go to, nice restaurants, and no one is going to complain that the oyster is pretty dirty. So here we clean, we sort, and then we, pack and do all of that kind of process. Shipping process is pretty intensive too. Yeah. So
do they have to stay in water, or how does that work? How do you, like oysters, how do you ship those?
Well, we harvest by hand in the bay. We take the bags out of the lines, we put them into the boats, then the boats go back to the landing, then we load them into the truck, then the truck arrives to the plant. Here we unload and we immediately put them in the cooler. So the most important part of the process is to make sure that the time in between the harvest and when the oysters get to the cooler is under control. So, during the summer and when we have extremely warm weather, we need to make sure that the process is going to be very fast. And we are pretty efficient on that. I will say that the time that it takes from harvest to get to the plant is around 2 hours or something like that.
And that's for food safety then.
Yes,
I mean, they can't just be sitting out forever because then they can start to go bad.
Yeah, the oysters don't have any issue. We have we need to be worried that because we want to control the temperature.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're shipping, it's very important that the oysters are below 50. So when the oysters get to the plant, we check the temperatures and then we put them in the cooler. We add some ice if the oysters are too warm. And then the ice is pretty efficient. So ice make all the magic of reducing the temperature of the oysters. And then we let them stay in the cooler. Our cooler usually is between 37 to 39 degrees in Fahrenheit. So it's pretty cold. And the oysters get used to that temperature and then we process them. Now we have a wet storage that is a closed system that have ocean water from the bay. And that's a recirculation system. So what we do is after we process, after we sort, after we clean, we put the oysters in this wet storage, and the oysters are pretty nice there. They are almost in the same condition of the bay, but in a controlled temperature, so they are below 50.
So do you shuck them, or do you ship them whole within the shell?
No, we don't chuck them. We just ship them for raw. So we ship oysters alive.
Yep.
And our oysters have a pretty good life. They can hold like 3 weeks out of the water without any problem. But the process is pretty fast. We pack and then we ship everything by airport. We fly everything. So our customers receive the oysters the following day or the next one, and then they put it in the cooler, and then they make the distribution to the restaurants.
So where do they all go? All over the country, or
all over the country?
Beyond the country?
No,
internationally?
No international yet. But right now our oysters are going very far. Most of our sales are going to California. We are serving Los Angeles. We're serving San Diego, a little bit also to San Francisco. But some oysters are going to New York, Miami, Denver. So different locations.
Wow. How do you sell? Do you have to go to the restaurants or the buyers, or is there a system where there's just big buyers who will take these and get them to the end user, or how does that work?
Yeah, there is wholesalers that help us with that process. And also we serve some local restaurants, and we have little customers too. But most of our oysters go to big wholesalers that distribute our oysters.
Crazy process from seed all the way to New York.
Yeah.
All the way from Skagit Bay here or wherever they end up.
Yeah, and it's incredible that we can harvest an oyster today, and customers can be enjoying that oysters tomorrow or I don't know, or Friday.
So it doesn't get any more fresh than that.
Yeah.
It's super fresh. Are there environmental concerns with growing fish out or shellfish out in the bay? Is that a challenge to make sure you're maintaining the health of the bay while doing this?
For us, the quality of the water is a priority, because our oysters live there.
Yeah.
So there is concerns related to how you handle, the rope and the bags pretty much are plastic. So we need to be very careful that everything that go to the bay then needs to return to the processing plant.
Right.
But in some way, shellfish generate habitat. So there is a lot of benefits of having shellfish in different bays.
Right.
Oysters and clams pretty much filtrate the water. So if you have them, they are gonna consume all the microalgae that will help to keep the water clean. So shellfish, since my point of view, is the protein of the future, because you don't need to use fresh water to produce them. You don't need to feed them, and in that process of feeding the oyster, they clean and purify the water. So it's a incredible source of protein for a world that is going to require a tremendous amount of protein to feed the population in the future. So I think everyone should start eating clams, oysters, and mussels to save the planet.
Yeah. What I guess that you're defining kind of your perspective on sustainability. Is that how you would describe your farm's focus on that?
Yeah, pretty much, and also we are pretty responsible of all the management of the motors. Take care that we don't dump any gas to the river or to the bay, and we are pretty careful with all that process. But the sustainability is pretty important for us.
Yeah, and then I think you said earlier this bay is different, and you talk about shellfish filtering, and I know that's been a problem in other places in the past if there are pollutants in the water. Do you face that here in Skagit Bay? Or you talk about lots of river water. I think that could be a good thing or bad thing for that.
Yeah, I think the water conditions of our bay are pretty unique. Our bay is located kind of in front of Deception Pass. That is pretty good because all the ocean water that is coming from the Strait Juan de Fuca is getting into our bay in the first place. So, and all the movement and the current that we have there allowed us to enjoy with a bay that is pretty healthy. We have never been closed for Vibrio or for red tide, so we're pretty lucky. And our oysters are pretty healthy, so we are pretty lucky to have that conditions.
Yeah, for sure. How did you get into all of this? I mean, you know so much, and this is just beyond anything I'm just learning about all these things. How did you start?
Well, we started many years ago with the clams, and then we wanted to do something different, so we start trying with the oysters. My dad was in this clam farming since the 80s, and we always wondering if the oysters was going to be okay, but we have a lot of people that told us that for the low salinity, oysters never will grow in our bay. And we always have that feeling that the oysters could live there because we find some. So finally in 2015 we start doing some experiment. My brother Sebastian was the manager of the company those days, and with my dad they start planning several lines, few, like one line here, one line there, with only a couple of bags for doing like experiment, just to see if the oyster will live or not. And the results were pretty incredible. Finally we discovered that the oysters were growing pretty well. They were growing fast. They were developing a lot of meat. So it's one of the conditions that is pretty incredible. Our oysters, every time you open one of our oysters, the cap is totally full. So that means that there's a lot of nutrients in that bay. Yeah. So then we started little by little we start, buying the materials, talking with different experts to learn different techniques. We study a lot, and because there is many farming techniques to grow oysters, there is a lot of farming techniques, but you need to have like a match in between what are the conditions on your bay, and then what are the techniques that you're going to use that is going to be the successful one. And we're still trying, different alternatives. We built some SIPA lines last year, and SIPA is a company from Australia that have a technology that is pretty interesting, and we are trying that technique too. And also we're trying a couple of floating bags. So we're trying different alternatives, and we're not sure if those ones are going to work or not. But so far, the flipping system is the one that has been working best from our bay.
So how long have you been working for this farm?
I came to the company in 2016. My brother used to be the manager, and he wanted to go back to Chile because I am from Chile. This is why my weird accent.
Yeah.
So my brother wanted to go back, and I was working in the university there, and we decided kind of switch. So I came here to the US with my whole family. And I started learning, but I knew a little bit because in my background I have also experience working in the salmon industry in Chile, and I have some experience in also working in the farm in Chile.
What kind of farming in Chile?
Many years ago, I used to be the financial manager of an investment fund that invested in farms. So we have a blueberry farm, and also I was managing a dairy. So I learned a lot since the other perspective of farming. And then coming here, and I'm a civil engineer. So, there's a lot of techniques that I learned in the university when I was young.
Yeah.
And then you use all of the management techniques to, accommodate and learn fast. So I was, learning about the oysters, the cycle of the oysters, the different farming techniques. I started learning about the flopsies, and pretty much what I love about the shellfish industry and aquaculture in general is that every day you're learning something. And you need to keep learning and researching and talking to different persons to learn something new every day. And if you change the process a little bit, you can have different results. So it's a pretty interesting industry.
Has your background as a civil engineer and your training and education in that been helpful as you're doing this you think like an engineer, so that must help as you put some of these systems together.
Yeah, totally helps. Totally helps because when you the background of engineering help you to develop some management skills.
Yeah.
And also what I like about being a civil engineer is that you're prepared, you're pretty flexible to learn new ways of do things, and then all the mathematics and the numbers help you to evaluate what are you doing. So sometimes I learned this when I was working in the farm back in Chile 10 or 15 years ago, and you need to measure everything. Like when we are doing a process, we measure and we analyze the results, and then we take decisions, based on numbers to understand if what we're doing is correct or not.
Right.
So
rather than just guessing.
Yeah, rather than just guessing. So there is a lot of management behind.
Yeah.
So this is why I think our farm is being successful. My brother background is economics. So both of us work very well together. He's still working in the company. He lives in Chile, but he flies here to the US like 6 months a year, something like that. And then we work together, and then he come back. But when he's there, also he help, in the management task. He run payrolls and do all the financial reports and other stuff.
Yeah. Take smart people like you and him to do these things. That's the part that scares me about, because people have asked me, well, you grew up on a farm. Are you going to get into get into farming, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm smart enough to, because you have to keep track of all of that stuff. You can't just go out and, plant corn or plant oysters or whatever and just hope for the best. You have to know what you're doing and make sure that it's going to work out.
Yeah, but also, I think is kind of attitude of life. You need to, because when we started, there is a lot of things that we didn't knew. But then when you are willing to learn and you are willing to risk and try different alternatives, and then you need to be prepared to have a successful result and bad results.
Yeah.
So, but everything is changing. And here, I remember we started doing all the application for the permitting and all of that, and then we said, okay, we need to do the mapping. How we do the mapping? And we said, okay, let's go and buy a drone, and we start playing with that drone and making the maps. And at the beginning, we did a lot of mistake.
Yeah.
I crashed one drone into the bay.
Oh no!
And then, but then everything is we are been going step by step. Like I said before, our company is not very big. If you look the management position, there is not too much. It's just my brother, myself, and what we do is we are very committed with our team. I mean, we feel that our workers are not just workers from us; they are kind of family. So we try to help them as much as we can. And we work together. I know I go with them to the bay. I perform the same task they perform. So then I can understand and I can know exactly, how it is to work under those conditions. And then when we are planning, how many people we need to perform these kind of jobs, and how many hours we're gonna take, and the tools that we need, all of that I kind of know in first person because I've been performing those jobs before. So if during the spring and summer, it's not very easy to reach me because many days will be going into the bay, building the lines, getting dirty, getting sand and mud in the boots, and that's the way to do it. I've been participating in the construction and all the process of building all the lines that we have. So I know how they work. So we are not managers that just sit in the office. We like to be there, and we like to do the farming from ourselves.
What was it like moving from Chile to the U.S.?
From us was not difficult, because I'm from the south of Chile, and the south of Chile, in terms of the weather, is pretty similar to Puget Sound. Yeah.
They farm a lot of raspberries there, don't they?
Blueberries, raspberries.
I know my dad
everything.
visited Chile to see the red raspberry farms there. I wanted to see how they did it there.
And most of those farms are located in the south of Chile, and I'm from the south of Chile. So for me, the weather is not an issue. I'm pretty related to the ocean and to the mountains, and so the evergreen state is pretty similar to my house.
Yeah.
So for me, it was kind of very similar.
What city? What city are you from?
I'm from Puerto Varas.
Okay.
So it's a very beautiful city from the south of Chile, very close to Puerto Montt, that is the capital of the 10th region, and the agriculture there is kind of similar. It doesn't have the development that it has here.
Yeah.
But they have salmon, they have oysters, they have mussels, they have different kind of, and the fish is kind of similar, because they have the same Pacific cold water that we have here.
Right.
So it's pretty similar. And I moved with my whole family, so
yeah, that helps.
Yeah.
Rather than having to go by yourself.
At the beginning, I must recognize that was kind of hard for the language,
Yeah.
My previous work at the university was head of the international office, so I had some fluency in English, but my accent is strong because my first language is Spanish. So, and I think for my kids and my wife was harder because they miss a lot the friends and the family. I have a lot of family here, so having my mom and my dad here is a tremendous help.
Yeah. What brought them up here?
Well, it's a very long story. My dad is from Rochester. He's been working in many projects, but he used to have a salmon processing plant in Alaska. Also has developed other projects, and for those accidents of life, he and the family started working in the Clams many years ago. And at the beginning, the Clams was a very, very small operation, very, very small. And then he married my mother, I don't remember, but many years ago, like 20 years ago. And they moved here with my two little brothers. And then, Sebastian grew up, and then he became the manager of the company when he was, just after university. So he have a lot of experience here.
Yeah. So what local places around here can I find your oysters or your clams?
Well, right now, not too many. We don't sell locally, pretty much. We are, selling most of our oysters outside of the state. Every year in summer, we sell some oysters to in Stanwood, and also we used to have a couple of restaurants in Seattle, but with the COVID and all of that, most of the restaurants had a lot of problems, so we don't have any sell point here. Our plan is to start over again and find local customers, and also we were planning to have like a distribution point so the customer can buy oysters or on the website or Instagram or wherever, and then come here and pick it up here. But that is not going to happen probably until a couple months more.
Yeah, it takes a bit of setup to do.
Yeah,
I'm sure. And you are on Instagram, right? Skagit Shellfish.
Yes, we have an Instagram, Skagit Shellfish. Not very active, I must say. We have some photos and pictures there. We need to give more energy so we can promote more our oysters.
Yeah, there's always more things to do, right?
Yeah, always more things to do. Yeah, my brother is in charge of that part.
Well, thank you for having me here and showing me the place and educating me on how shellfish are grown. There's so many things, like I said earlier, that I didn't know at all. So this is fascinating to me. And you have a great story too. This is really cool what you guys have going here. So thanks for having me.
No, thank you for the visit. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and hopefully we can continue learning and growing in the future. So we provide incredible oysters to our community too.
This is the Real Food, Real People podcast. These are the stories of the people who grow your food.